Hi, Chris. Thank you very much for being here. Susan Pequot from Ridgefield, and it's a pleasure to have our newest senator with us. I want to do a follow-up on requiring background checks for gun purchases. As I understand, one of the principal objections being raised against Senator Schumer's initiatives is there are a fairly vocal, well-funded group of individuals who believe background checks for private sales should not be applied, private gun sales. So my question is, could you illuminate for the audience, where do we already get background checks in the case of a sale of a gun? How are they applied? And why is there an objection to background checks in private gun sales? I believe we already, for instance, maintain the effectiveness of at least a statewide registry. That would be called your driver's license. And I'm very curious as to why there is such an objection to that, and why what seems to be a fairly simple measure that would help us improve the contribute to mental health, check on backgrounds, have guns registered. Why are there such vociferous objections against it, and what can we do about it?
Well, thanks for the question, and let's just sort of say at the outset that though there is very loud opposition to it, there is not broad opposition. Poll after poll, including a recent national Quinnipiac poll that just came out this past week, shows that 90% of Americans support universal background checks, and there are several polls that show upwards of 80% of gun owners support universal background checks. These gun owners don't want criminals to have guns. Gun owners want to make sure that that it is law-abiding citizens that own these weapons, and so we are all largely on the same page here. It's difficult to get the exact statistic in terms of how many guns today go through background checks and how many don't, but it could be upwards of 30 to 40% of sales today that are outside of the realm of background checks. If you go into a gun dealer, a federally licensed gun dealer, they are required to do a background check. But if you have a private sale that happens just between you and your neighbor, or at a gun show, those private sales done by non-full-time gun dealers are not required to go through background checks. And what we're saying is that they should. The background check is not an onerous thing. It happens most of the time when you're standing right there in a matter of minutes. The objection that has been raised by the NRA, who, by the way, 10 years ago supported universal background checks. After Columbine High School, Wayne LaPierre, the same guy that runs the NRA today, came through the Judiciary Committee of the United States Senate and said the NRA supports universal background checks and closing all these loopholes. Today they do not support it. And I'm not going to go into a sort of long hypothesis on why that change happened, but the essence of their objection today is that the only way that you make this enforceable is that the person that does the background check has to keep some record of doing it. That's the only way that you can know ultimately that it got done. We can't have just a system of trust that everybody did it without any ability to keep records. The fear from that 10% is that that's a national registry of guns that's going to be used for an ultimate confiscation program someday down the line. And what we've said is that no one's interested in aggregating this data. We just want the person who does it to keep a record so that if at some point there's some reason to believe that a particular gun show isn't conducting background checks, that we can just go and check to make sure that they're actually happening, not that we want to take that data and put it into some big national registry. And so I think that there is a fear that there's an agenda that doesn't exist. There's not an agenda here to take people's guns or to catalog every gun owner in the country. There's just the recognition that if you're going to require the background checks be done, it's pointless if you don't actually require the person who's selling the gun to hold a record, at least for a short period of time, at least for a year or so after, showing that they actually did the check.
Follow-up. Does that mean that a federally licensed gun seller must keep those records for a year?
So today you have to keep those records, but the ATF is today, there's all sorts of rules layered on top of it, but the ATF today by law is restricted on the number of times that they can go review those records, and so there's lots of protections built in, even to the existing system.
So there's no additional burden
that we have now. No, there won't be.
Okay.
And
Janet, Pequot already violated the law in place in '94 and established that very database in violation of the law.
Just to ask folks, if you have handouts and stuff like that, please just save them to the end. And one happy to hand them out outside, people that are leaving, but please just don't hand them out during the actual program. Call it David